Welcome to the Springs in the Desert podcast. We are the friends you can take with you wherever you are on the path of infertility. If this podcast has been a blessing to you, would you consider giving a gift today to ensure that those on the path of infertility always have a friend in their back pocket? Thanks for your support, and let's dive in. Hey there, welcome back to the Springs in the Desert podcast. I am Jillian, your host, and I am back with the one and only Father Paul, and we are talking more about the Sacraments today. How are you, Father Paul?
I am doing well, better now that I'm talking with you, of course, yes.
Oh, you're too kind. Listeners, we have been embarking on a series on the sacraments, and so we'll make sure to link all of those here in the show notes for you so that you can listen to all of them. There's not necessarily a particular order that you need to listen to them in, although they did, of course, come out in a sequence. We refer to the sacraments back and forth to each other throughout them, so it might be fun to kind of listen to one and go back to it and maybe pick up some other resources if you and your spouse or maybe a small group want to talk about the sacraments. Today, we are going to talk about marriage and holy orders. So holy matrimony and holy orders. It's, I think, such a beautiful sacrament to reflect upon today. I personally have a lot of people in my life who had celebrated anniversaries this week, which was kind of fun to be able to reflect on that ahead of this episode. So I think what's really interesting, Anne and Father Paul are from the Byzantine tradition. I am not. And so I get to learn so much from them about just the richness and some of the differences in our traditions that really give me, I think, such an appreciation for the liturgy and for the Lord. And so I'm wondering, Father Paul, if we could maybe start there with some of the liturgical maybe similarities or kind of the liturgical celebrations of the two sacraments of holy matrimony and holy orders. And what are some of in the Byzantine tradition, what are some of maybe the similarities in those liturgies?
Absolutely. The funny thing is you said you get to learn so much and you get to do all this where I get to showcase my ignorance of the Western Church and your liturgical traditions because, I was raised Greek Catholic. So this is all I've ever known. And right. It's just too funny, I think. Right. So you get to learn, I get to showcase my ignorance and whatnot, but I learn as well. Right. So in the Byzantine Eastern liturgical tradition, there are so many similarities that are very, very just overt, right, between the rite of matrimony and the rite of ordination, right? And I think the biggest one that people would point to is what's known as the dance of Isaiah. And so what happens here is it's always three, right? Everything's always three because, the Trinity and we're, all that fun stuff, right? So we have a table at the center of sort of unless at the center of the church, but in the middle of the church kind of, and that's called the tetrapod. And during the wedding ceremony, during the ritual part, once the couple is wed, they are processed around this tetrapod 3 times, and the hymn, the dance of Isaiah, is sung. And so this same thing happens at holy orders, except it's around the holy table, right? It's around the altar, not around the tetrapod. So there are these very distinct sort of ritualistic things that happen, but also on a more as the youth of America would say today, the more meta thing, right? The more supernatural, mystical aspects of it is the uniting of the couple, right, to Jesus Christ through this sacrament, or in the case of holy orders, right, the uniting of this man to Jesus Christ, and it's really one and the same. If we think about the idea of sacramental unity with Jesus Christ in this way, in a very close, intimate, interpersonal relationship, right? That we are called to a certain, it's not a betterness, right? We're not called to a better life or a holier life. It's just a certain existence within this sacramental like milieu, of what we talked about in other, right here we are referencing other other sacraments, right? We talked about a baptism and chrismation, right? Or confirmation, this idea of this universal call to holiness and the expression of that call, right?
That's a really interesting and beautiful image. I think visual representation can be really helpful. I'm wondering, Father, if you can talk a little bit more. Like, let's go deeper into how, like, what does that mean? Like that for specifically in the Byzantine tradition. But I think the Western Church can learn a lot from this too. That um, this is not isolated. But why would we have this like centrality of the altar or the tetrapod for the couple? Like, what does this express about these sacraments? What the calling is from these sacraments? What would you say to that?
Well, if we think about let's just go with the altar, right? So we can, like, the tetrapod is not like the altar, but it's the table outside. And this goes all the way back to our ancient Jewish, shared patrimony, if you will, right? With the tent of meeting and this and this table and that table and all this, right? So it's all part of the liturgical worship. So we'll just look at it that way, right? So we think about what is going on in the kingdom of heaven, right? In the age to come, what will be happening. And I always like to joke, it's always time for levity here when we're talking about serious things. We often think of, quote, heaven as like sitting around on a cloud drinking a beer with Uncle Frank, who I haven't seen in 45 years, right? And it's like, well, that's not really, that's much more of it's both a modern idea, but also a ancient heresy, if you will. It's a Neoplatonic idea of the pre-existence of souls and all of this, but we won't go there. So, right, what is going on in the kingdom of heaven? Well, there is this heavenly worship, right? And we hear about this in the book of Revelation, right? This is where all of our liturgical praxis ultimately comes from. It's not like this weird historical development that people were just making up, right? So first of all, if we look at liturgy in the church in general, right, that ties us to heaven, period. That's what's going on, right? So liturgy ties us to heaven, and we see all of this sort of prophecy, right, in Revelation. And what's going on in this heavenly liturgy? Well, there's a throne, right? And what is the throne? It's the altar. And who is sitting upon this throne, right? God. And who is worshiping him? At the foot of the throne, the angels. And what are the angels doing, right? They're going around the altar. They're bowing, they're worshiping, they're doing all of this. So this liturgical action on our part is a symbol. Now here's a little thing, like in the Eastern traditions, the word symbol and symbolism might have a slight different connotation than in the West, right? So this is like a symbol of us not only enacting, but participating in this heavenly worship, taking on this this idea of this sort of angelic life, right? Now we might think, oh, so what, does this make us angels? Like, no. But what this does is then hearken us back to our earliest days of creation in the book of Genesis, right? So we kind of have this bookend, right, of Revelation and Genesis. And then what's happening here is we are essentially being reinitiated into our call of living that angelic life, because Adam and Eve were meant to do that, right? They were meant, and I believe I brought this up in other podcasts too, they were meant to be companions with the angels, right? And that's what we are meant to do. But because of the fall, because of sin, because of all of that fun stuff, we have to spend our time here on earth trying to get back to that, right? And we see examples of this first and foremost, right? Our Lady, right? The Blessed Mother, she is the example of, yes, this is possible. And every other single one of us falls short in some way, but that's okay, right? Because we have this idea that it is possible. And then like reenacting this angelic worship is a reality of the sacrifice of the Mass, or in the Divine Liturgy, where we literally have a point, right? The Sanctus, right? The holy, holy, holy. And now this all happens as part of the ordination or marital rite as well, right? In a context of mass or divine liturgy, right? So we have holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, Hosanna in the highest, right? That's the hymn of the angels, right? That we hear in Isaiah 6. Then what's the next? Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, Hosanna in the highest, right? That's the hymn of the Hebrew children in the Gospels, right? In the Gospel of John, when Christ is entering in Jerusalem on what we now call, Palm Sunday. So what is going on here? Well, on a mystical level and on a liturgical level, literally, when we sing that hymn, what we are doing is we are asking the Holy Spirit to come upon us and to elevate the liturgy of earth, right? The hymn of the Hebrew children, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, with the heavenly liturgy, the hymn of the seraphim, right? Holy, 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 and the two become one. So we ascend through the grace of the Holy Spirit, while the heavenly liturgy condescends and we become one in that. And so in these rituals, right, in this liturgy, this sort of unity between heaven and earth is enacted out. And that's, sorry, that was longer than I thought it was going to be, but that's your answer.
No, but the context is so beautiful to be able to understand the point that what's happening here is like a real unity, that's so such a beautiful, not just scriptural references, but the visual representation in the liturgy, and also our experience as married couples who have been married, likely sacramentally, and have an experience of that, a memory of that, and can go back to that and recall that experience. So, Father, then both of these, right? We're talking about holy orders and holy matrimony, and these are called the sacraments of service. And so what does everything that we've just unpacked here, how does that help us understand? Like, why are they acts of, or sacraments, of service? Like, what does that mean for these two sacraments?
Oh, sure. Well, think about what we hear in at the end of Genesis 2, right? And St. Paul echoes this in Ephesians 5, right? That a man leaves his mother and father and cleaves to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, right? So there's really no difference in this aspect between matrimony and holy orders. As far as I'm concerned, I'm sure people would like to argue me on that point, but that's fine. We can do that. And let the comments fly, right?
Sure.
I love social media. But no, right. So this idea, right, that you leave the protective nature of your family, right, in one way or another, and then you become part of this, I'm going to say like new family, because we're still united in Jesus Christ, right? But you become this new thing rooted in a new sacramental existence of which you are in charge of, in a sense, right? And the two become one. So we have this idea of being rooted like together sacramentally, and you are no longer living for yourself, but you're also not like living for the other person. You are both living for Jesus Christ. And same thing with holy orders. We see that this sacramental bond, this unity, is essentially the same, right? In that you are now leaving the confines of, let's say, certain, how do I say this without being too like flowery about it? Like, you're leaving certain securities behind, right? Like when you think about it, right? If a man or a woman, you leave home, it's kind of scary, right? You're out on your own, or you're leaving your home, and you're getting married and you're starting a new home, right? This is scary. Well, same thing. If you think about holy orders, you're leaving the sort of the safety and confines of the pew, shall we say, right? You're leaving home in that sense, and now you are venturing in this new life in Jesus Christ, where you're up front, man. You're out there. You're helping to bring people to Jesus Christ, but you're serving them the sacraments. Think about it, like my liturgical theology professor in seminary always said, he goes, I hate when people say I'm going to go take Holy Communion, right? Because you don't go take communion, right? You receive it. But we
Yes.
right? You receive it, but then we take for granted, how do we receive it? Through this broken lump of flesh who is a priest, right? Who is no better than anybody else, but for some reason has been called and chosen to do this job where it's his job to literally serve you the Eucharist. So if Father seems cranky or tired some days, it's because he's got a lot on his shoulders, all right? Just want
Yes.
to put that out there. That's a
Yes.
big responsibility. But right, so we don't like take communion, right? We receive the Eucharist, and the priest, distributes this, right? Or the deacon, right? He serves this, right, to the people. And think about service that way. Think about service to our spouse, right? It's not just getting your husband's like pipe and slippers. Like that dream world of the 1950s is lovely, but that's not how it goes, right?
Sure.
And I'm being very sarcastic there, just so we're clear. But right, it's not about that, right? Service is like, as a husband, like making sure that your wife is cared for both temporally, but also like, sacramentally, that you're the spiritual head of the house, right? You're making sure she's cared for, but then also she's making sure you are on the spiritual path as well, keeping you in check, making sure everything is good. And then she is providing for you as well, and we can look at this either on a spiritual level or like a temporal societal level, right? Where we live in a society now where it's like totally good for both men and women to be providing, right, for one another. So there's no longer this social stigma of like, oh, woman has to stay at home and this and that, which, if you do, that's great. It's however the
Mhm.
relationship works. But there's
Yeah.
this idea of like unending sacrifice for one another, that you're no longer like, I'm going to go do
Yeah.
this and this is what it is on either end. It's, well, we are going to decide to do whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Father, what I'm hearing, right, is that they're both in holy orders and holy matrimony. There is this mutual giving of oneself and receiving from the other, whether that is Jesus Christ Himself, or your spouse, and that takes a lot of humility, a lot of practice, just like a lot of consistency, and that, yeah, that there is a, no matter what, the as you said, whether one spouse is at home working outside of the home doing this, that those sort of details really have nothing to do with the actual, like, the sacrament that exists there, that those can flow from that giving and receiving, that you are providing for each other in the spiritual, the practical, the physical, the mental, like the joy of the home, the heart of the home. Um, or, right, if in holy orders, right, this like mutual giving and receiving of, yeah, the priest and Jesus, I think is, and the church, like, just such a really beautiful, I think, like, summation of that. And that then is a service, like, to the world, to each other, like to your family, to your extended family, your neighbors, etc. Would you say that, like, that giving and receiving is a good way of explaining that?
Oh, absolutely, right. And it's a witness, it's a certain type of martyrdom, right? It's a witness, like you're
Mm.
saying. Exactly. And it's the idea, right? Giving and receiving. And a great example of this, if we're talking about like, holy orders and matrimony and all this, right? So I don't know what the private priest prayers are like in the Western tradition, but like in the Eastern tradition, right before the priest goes and fractures the lamb, right? Breaks apart what will become, the fractured body of Christ. He's the last line of that prayer is, deign to give us your most pure body and precious blood from your mighty hand through us and to all the people. Right. So it unites everybody in this idea of like, okay, Christ is giving this to all of us, right? But he's giving it specifically like to the priest to say, hey, from my hand, here you go. And then from me, right, from the priest to the people, right? And there's this back and forth. But what are we then? Like, so we're receiving this Eucharist, but then what are we giving back? We're giving him ourselves, right? We're giving him our life. We're giving him essentially also our sin, our struggle, our fear, our hope, our love, right? We're literally giving everything that makes us us and giving it back to the one who created us, right? So there's this mutual back and forth in all of this idea of the sacramentality of it all.
Yeah. Well, Father, there is a certain person you mentioned earlier, Mary, who, you know, is a great model, of course, for us. We will never be able to replicate perfectly her perfect life. But I'm wondering how perhaps like these sacraments, particularly holy orders and holy matrimony, how does this allow us to give our own fiat on the path of infertility? Like, how can we? And these are, of course, covering two big sacraments in one episode is really it's challenging to try to like how can we encompass sort of a overarching theme about these sacraments, but and so maybe there's you know maybe two separate conversations to happen about this, but I think right there is for couples who are experiencing infertility or loss, like what is the grace of the sacrament allowing, how does it enable them to give their yes, let it be done according to your will in their marriage?
Absolutely. I think the most important part there is realizing the let it be done to me according to your will. Because when I first read, the notes and everything, I was thinking, how often do we look at Mary and think that the sort of the fiat, right? That it's just yes. She said yes. It's like, no, she didn't say like, yeah, man, it's cool, whatever. She said, let it be done to me according to your will. So what does that entail? Well, a lot, right? Especially in her case. But think about what happens, right? When she says, let it be done to me according to your will. She becomes very, very, very intimately united to Jesus Christ in a very interpersonal and very specific way, right? So now at that point, we don't have sacraments yet, right? So there is no like sacramental unity in the sense that we would think of it now. So this is the closest you're going to get at that point, right? So she becomes united to Jesus Christ in a way that does not exist then mystically and spiritually until we are given baptism, right? So that let it be done to me according to your will means, yes, I will receive Jesus Christ, right? He will become part of me. I will become part of him. But what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean just like happiness, right? It means suffering. It means loss. It means struggle. It means towing the line, right? It means being vigilant. It means taking on this role of martyrdom, of being a witness, right? And being willing to sacrifice every earthly thing we have in order to ensure that we are continuing to carry out the will of God as he directs us. And we don't always know what that is. Like in Mary's case, like, yeah, sure, okay, she knew what was going to be going on. I mean, there's in Luke 2, right? There's the prophecy of Simeon and Anna, with the whole idea, a sword will pierce your heart, right? That's like the prefigurement and the prophecy of the crucifixion and her pain that she would experience in that moment. But I mean, she did know what was going on, and not just because Gabriel told her, like the joke goes, right? With the song, Mary, Did You Know? It's like, yeah, Gabriel told me. No, the reason she knew is because she prayed, right? The reason she knew is because she was living that life before the incarnation. And then afterward, it's not like that sort of that, let's say that initiation into a life in Jesus Christ is the end of anything. No, that's like just the start, right? That's the beginning. But think about what we do before any sacrament. What is there? There's preparation, right? So Mary, it wasn't just something like she wasn't just like hanging around doing her thing and then this angel shows up. She was preparing her whole life for that moment, not really knowing essentially if and when it would come or exactly what it meant, but she was prepared and she was always preparing. Then that moment happens, and then what does she do? She just doesn't stop, because then it wouldn't happen. Like everything that was supposed to happen after that doesn't happen. So we ourselves, we enact that mystery in our own lives, right? We prepare for these sacraments, right? We prepare, we get ourselves ready, then we receive this grace, and then that's when the hard work starts, because we have to like hold on to that grace. And when we're experiencing things like, loss and infertility and stuff, that really cuts to the core of who we are, like I always say, right? And it's like really, really hard because that cuts to the core of the human person, but also to an extent to the core of the sacramental reality in what we have sort of convinced ourselves it's supposed to be, right? Not what it really is. And that idea of the universal call to holiness expressed through this sacramental life, right? It's not about like, children, quote unquote, right? It's about your life, your spouse's life, and your united life in Jesus Christ. And whatever flows from there then is that gift, is that fruit of the marriage, right? It's not necessarily expressed in one particular way, as we've come to sort of, understand.
Yeah.
And and so like the idea too that like you can live a perfectly holy, prayerful, full familial life in the church, right? With it being, quote, like just me and my husband, unquote, that I say with very, very,
Yes.
heavy tone, because it's not that at all, right? That's the start of it all. That's the crux of it all. That's the sacrament, right? It's that's it.
Right. So, Father, would you say, I mean, of course, Holy Orders is a different sacrament, but I think a lot of what you're saying can be applied to Holy Orders, right? That this, like, this surrendering, that there's this, yes, like, let it be done in Holy Orders. Would you say that much of what you were saying can also be applicable to Holy Orders?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Completely, totally, like 100%, right? Let it be
Sure.
done to me according to your will and the will of my bishop, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a big let it be done to me in holy orders. Absolutely.
Mm,
And I think, hopefully any priest listening would agree with me on that, yeah, oh, there's a hefty yes, all right.
yeah,
And hefty degree
absolutely.
of surrender and all of these kind of things. And like and this is something actually Alyssa and I talk about often, not to get too personal, but like why not? We're here, we're Springs. Why not? Let's get personal. Like sort of like little things that were little things, like the idea of home ownership. Like we really can't own a home because one, priests don't get paid that much money, right? But two, can't own our
Yeah.
own home because like one, like canon law says you're supposed to live, in the house provided by the church. But also we just, what if we get transferred? What if we get moved or what have you, this or that?
Right.
So it's like, you give up those little things, right? Like home ownership or like being able to do certain things to your house that you want to, you know, um, if you're living in like a property owned by the church, I can't just like save up my own money and build an addition on it. If
Right.
you need to do something, if the parish doesn't have the money for it, like you can't do it. And I know sometimes like I'm not equating that to like, infertility, but I'm saying there are different types of
Yeah.
sacrifice, like on different levels. But then also, if we think about it too, there are just certain things that aren't attainable anymore, let's say, or whatever,
Yeah.
right? You just
Yep.
give
Yep.
and yeah. So it's all just this level of sacrifice. But then why do we do it? Because we are all called to a certain state in life in this universal call to holiness, and that acts like a mirror, like to help us see ourselves, right? To help us see our own sinfulness and our own shortcomings, and realizing those things, and then working on them. And you are called to a certain state in life, whether it's marriage, holy orders, or what have you. And what that does is it enables you to see things about yourself you couldn't see before, right? And in this sacramental mirror, then we grow and we become better people who for our spouse, for the church, for the Lord, right? And ultimately for ourselves and for our own salvation. So I think that's sort of this idea of sacrifice and growth and holiness and the
Yeah.
sacramental life.
Yeah, your example of not being able to buy your own home. I've had, I know, a few conversations with people who will say things like, sort of see it the opposite way, like they're a lay person and they're like, he doesn't even have to own a home, he doesn't have to pay a mortgage, he doesn't have, like, talking about their priest who like doesn't have these, and I just think that it's such a practical example of like not comparing crosses, that like every, we're all called to different situations in life, and there are, yeah, sort of pros and cons is the wrong terms that I want to use, but there are hills and valleys in all of those things. And while it might feel to someone who's maybe, I don't know, having a tough time owning a home, and like, oh, it would be so much easier because like the priest doesn't have to do that, where from that perspective, like, I would love to be able to do this, like to have that experience, to be able to do something, add an addition or do something that it's just, it's so good to not compare our crosses.
Absolutely, Jillian. Right. And that's the whole crux, right? We can't go and, call out other people's crosses, right? And even as something as let's say work a day, right? As like that house is like, okay, great. Yeah. I don't have to pay a mortgage, but how many people who are not blood relatives of yours have keys to your house? Right? Like
Yeah.
that, like how many people can come over and be like, hey, Father, I need XYZ from the shed over there. Or like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
totally going to break the fourth wall here for a second. Father, I noticed you left a snowblower out last night. My friend who goes to another church saw this, called me and told me. So I'm telling you, you better put it away before somebody steals it. Right? Okay. Just
Right.
say it, folks. Yeah. We have to be on this
Yes.
human level, right?
Yes.
So let's
Right.
not compare cross. Let's not compare cross.
Yes. Absolutely.
And that's a true story, by the way. Just so we're clear.
Yeah. There's it's just such, I think, such a good example, and hopefully, like, as you said, some levity to just the fact that, yeah, these sacraments provide us the grace to live out what we've been called to live out. And so I think, Father, before we wrap up this episode, for the couples who are listening, and then for the priests who are listening, what is maybe one encouragement or one place that they can go to have evidence, or to maybe, again, I've been using this word, like, soak in the graces of the sacrament that they are living out? Where would just be one piece of encouragement for them?
Yeah, I think for both, honestly, private, personal, daily prayer. I think for both, because let's think about it. Whether you're a busy husband or wife or a busy priest, right? What's a lot of time the very first thing that goes is our personal prayer life. And I'm not talking about like the part of the prayer like asking Jesus for stuff, but like the actual like liturgical prayer, whether it be like the divine office or the Psalms, or if you pray a couple decades of the rosary in the morning, or whatever your personal prayer rule is. That's like the first thing that goes so often. And just if you're struggling with that, as so many of us do, like just return to that, just try it. And that's where we kind of can sort of re-understand that grace and kind of just spend that time with Jesus Christ. I mean, we're united to him in such a beautiful, mystical way. And, it's like that whole idea, call your mother, she worries. Well, call Jesus, he worries, he does worry about us. He does care about us. He wants to hear from you, right?
Yes.
And that idea of personal prayer is just the way to go. So, yeah, that's that's my sales pitch for personal prayer. Mm-hmm.
Father Paul, I think that's a really great suggestion. I know for me personally, that is so true. That is like the prayers, my daily personal prayers, the first thing that usually gets chopped off the to-do list or pushed back and back and back until it doesn't happen. And so I think that's such a good reminder. Thank you, Father Paul, for talking about holy orders and holy matrimony. And I hope, listeners, for you, that this gives you at least a little something to reflect on with your spouse or with the Lord, to be able to ask him to see the evidence of the grace of the sacrament that you are living out in your daily life. And just know that we are praying for you wherever you are on the path of infertility or loss. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us for this Springs in the Desert podcast episode. We would be so grateful if you took a minute to rate, review, subscribe, and give today so that we can reach more listeners on the path of infertility. Don't forget to check out our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, and go to our website, springsinthedesert.org, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and community prayer list, read our blog, and register for virtual and in-person events. And most importantly, remember that God loves you so much, and so do we.